The morning air in Glacier Ridge, Montana, carried the sharp bite of early autumn as Marcus Webnank knelt beside his modest food cache. His weathered hands worked methodically, securing the rope that suspended a small canvas bag between two lodgepole pines. The bag barely held 3 days' worth of supplies: dried venison, a block of cheese, some trail mix, and a handful of energy bars. Around him, the annual Wilderness Survival Challenge was taking shape. Dozens of participants had arrived at the remote mountain location, each staking their claim to a section of the vast forest. This was no ordinary camping trip. For 2 weeks, survivalists from across the country would test their skills against nature, with minimal gear and whatever food they could preserve from wildlife. Marcus had been preparing for this challenge for months. At 52, he was older than most competitors, his weathered face and calloused hands telling stories of decades spent in the backcountry. He had worked as a wilderness guide for 30 years before his company downsized, forcing him into early retirement. This challenge represented more than just competition. It was validation that his skills still mattered in a world increasingly dominated by younger faces and flashy social media personalities. 20 yards away, a group of younger survivalists gathered around an impressive structure. Jake Morrison, a 28-year-old YouTube personality with 500,000 followers, directed his cameraman as they filmed his elaborate food storage system. His cache was a masterpiece of engineering. A large wooden platform suspended 15 feet high, reinforced with climbing rope and carabiners, holding at least a week's worth of gourmet freeze-dried meals, protein bars, and vacuum-sealed packages. There are 3 others like this, Marcus thought, watching similar structures being erected throughout the camp. Sarah Chun had constructed an equally impressive cache on the eastern ridge. Brothers Tyler and Connor Davidson had built matching platforms near the river bend. Each structure seemed designed more for Instagram than practicality. Jake noticed Marcus watching and sauntered over, his cameraman following dutifully behind. The red recording light blinked steadily. "Hey there, old-timer," Jake said, his tone dripping with condescension masked as friendliness. "That your food setup?" Marcus nodded, continuing his work without looking up. Jake circled the modest cache, barely suppressing a smirk. "Dude, that tiny thing? You know we are out here for 2 weeks, right?" His cameraman zoomed in on Marcus's simple bag, then panned back to Jake's elaborate platform visible in the background. "It will do," Marcus replied quietly. "I mean, no offense, but that is pretty inadequate for a challenge like this." Jake gestured expansively toward his own setup. "You gotta think big out here, man. Protection, elevation, proper storage. That little bag is basically a bare piñata waiting to happen." Several other participants had gathered now, drawn by Jake's loud voice and the camera. Sarah Chun approached, her designer hiking boots barely scuffed despite the rugged terrain. "Is that really your whole cache?" she asked, genuine concern mixing with disbelief in her voice. "Marcus, right? Listen, I have some extra rope if you want to build something more substantial. You cannot just hang a grocery bag in a tree and hope for the best." "I appreciate the concern," Marcus said, tying off his final knot. "But I know what I am doing." Connor Davidson laughed from behind the group. "Bro, my grandmother could build a better cache than that, and she is afraid of squirrels." The gathering crowd murmured in agreement. Someone pulled out their phone, likely already posting to social media. Marcus could imagine the caption: "Old man clearly unprepared for wilderness challenge." "Look," Jake continued, his voice taking on a patronizing tone that made Marcus's jaw tighten. "This is not the 1970s anymore. Survival has evolved. You need to adapt or you will wash out in the first week." "That cache is embarrassing, honestly." Marcus finally looked up, meeting Jake's eyes. The younger man's confidence wavered for just a moment under the intensity of that gaze. "We will see," Marcus said simply. Jake threw his hands up in mock surrender. "Hey, do not say I did not warn you. When the bears come calling, do not expect any of us to share our supplies." He turned to his cameraman. "Make sure you got all that. This is going to be great content when he quits." As the group dispersed, heading back to their elaborate setups, Marcus noticed one person who had not joined in the mockery. Elena Rodriguez, a 40-year-old park ranger from New Mexico, stood at a distance. She caught his eye and offered a small, knowing nod before turning away. Marcus returned to his work, double-checking his knots one final time. The canvas bag swayed gently in the breeze, unassuming and simple. Around him, the forest stretched endlessly in all directions. Somewhere in those trees, black bears were already beginning their hyperphagia, the frantic feeding period before winter hibernation. Let them laugh, he thought. They would understand soon enough. The first 3 days passed without incident. Marcus fell into the rhythm of wilderness life easily, his body remembering skills that had never really left. He fished in the cold mountain streams, identified edible plants, and maintained his small fire with practiced efficiency. Each evening he checked his cache. The small bag remained untouched, swaying peacefully in the wind. The elaborate caches, however, had become the talk of the camp. Jake's daily vlogs showcased his impressive setup, with dramatic shots of his platform silhouetted against mountain sunsets. Sarah posted Instagram stories of her gourmet freeze-dried meals. The Davidson brothers turned their cash checks into a competitive routine, racing each other up the ropes while other participants cheered. Marcus kept to himself, but he could not escape the whispers. On the 4th morning, everything changed. Marcus woke to shouting. He emerged from his simple lean-to to find chaos erupting through the camp. Jake was running between campsites, his face pale, his cocky demeanor completely shattered. Bear. There was a bear. My cache is destroyed. Participants rushed toward the western section where Jake had set up camp. Marcus followed, a knot forming in his stomach. The scene was devastating. Jake's elaborate platform lay in splinters on the ground. Torn packages littered the area, their contents scattered and trampled. Claw marks gouged deep into the wood. The climbing ropes had been shredded like tissue paper. Jake stood in the middle of the destruction, his hands shaking as his cameraman filmed everything. 2 weeks of food, gone. Just gone. How did it even reach that high? A challenge official arrived, a weathered woman named Patricia who had been monitoring the participants from a distance. She surveyed the damage with a grim expression. Black bear, probably a big male preparing for hibernation, she said. They can climb better than most people realize, and they can smell food from miles away. The bigger and more elaborate the cache, the more enticing the scent profile. But it was 15 feet up, Jake protested, his voice cracking. Patricia pointed to the claw marks. They are incredibly strong and motivated. That platform was solid, but it was also a beacon. Too much food concentrated in one place, elevated like that, it created a target. Before anyone could process this, Sarah's voice screamed from the eastern ridge. No, 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 and no. Marcus and the others rushed toward her camp. The scene was identical. Her cache had been completely obliterated, food strewn everywhere, the wooden structure reduced to kindling. Sarah sat on the ground, tears streaming down her face. I spent 2 months planning this. I had everything organized, portioned, labeled. She looked up at Patricia. What am I supposed to do now? You can withdraw from the challenge and we will escort you out, Patricia said gently. Or you can stay and adapt with whatever skills you have. By midday, the full extent of the damage became clear. 4 of the 5 largest caches had been destroyed. Jake's platform, Sarah's structure, and both Davidson brothers' elaborate setups lay in ruins. Only the participants with smaller, more discreet storage systems remained untouched, including Marcus. The atmosphere in the camp shifted dramatically. The cocky confidence that had permeated the first few days evaporated, replaced by fear and uncertainty. Jake sat by his destroyed cache, no longer filming, staring blankly at the wreckage. Sarah had already called for evacuation, unwilling to continue without her carefully planned supplies. Connor Davidson approached Marcus in the late afternoon. The mockery from days earlier had vanished from his expression, replaced by desperation. How did you know? Connor asked quietly. How did you know to keep it small? Marcus looked up from the fish he was cleaning. Experience. Bears are attracted to concentration. The bigger the food source, the more worth their effort. A small cache does not register as worth the climb or the energy expenditure. Connor glanced back toward his brother, who was still surveying their losses. We thought bigger meant safer. Higher, stronger, more secure. Bigger meant more noticeable, Marcus replied. In the wilderness, sometimes the best strategy is not to stand out. Tyler Davidson joined them, his pride clearly wounded. Can you teach us? We have maybe 2 days of food left between us. We will starve if we do not figure this out fast. Marcus studied both brothers. They were humbled now, genuinely afraid. He remembered being young once, thinking he knew everything until the mountains taught him otherwise. If you are really listening, then I will help. But you do what I say exactly as I say it. No cameras, no social media posts, no shortcuts. Deal, both brothers said simultaneously. Jake approached the group, his cameraman notably absent. His YouTube swagger had completely disappeared. He looked like a man confronting his own mortality. I messed up, he admitted, the words clearly difficult for him. I built that cache for the views, not for the reality. Can I learn too? Marcus considered him for a long moment. The forest has a way of humbling everyone eventually. Some learn faster than others. You willing to stop performing and start surviving? Jake nodded, his jaw set with new determination. If you are rooting for these guys to turn things around, take a moment and subscribe to the channel. This survival story is just getting started, and you will not want to miss what happens next. Patricia observed from a distance as Marcus began instructing the small group. She had seen this pattern before in her years managing wilderness challenges. The loudest voices rarely lasted. It was always the quiet ones, the ones who understood that nature did not care about followers or likes, who truly knew how to survive. Marcus's small cache still hung peacefully between the pines, untouched and unremarkable, exactly as intended. The next 5 days transformed the dynamic of the entire challenge. Marcus became an unlikely mentor, teaching the humbled participants skills that no YouTube video could replicate. He showed Jake how to read animal tracks in the mud, distinguishing between deer paths and bear trails. The young man who had once performed for cameras now moved quietly through the forest, observing instead of broadcasting. The Davidson brothers learned to fish with patience rather than aggression, understanding that survival was about consistent small victories, not dramatic moments. Connor discovered he had a natural talent for identifying edible plants, while Tyler became skilled at building efficient fires with minimal smoke. Even Elena, the park ranger who had always known her craft, joined the informal lessons, sharing her own knowledge and creating a genuine community among the survivors. Marcus taught them his cache philosophy. Multiple small storage points scattered throughout their territory, each one modest enough to escape a bear's interest, each one positioned with careful attention to wind patterns and animal behavior. Small and spread out beats big and obvious every single time, he explained as they worked. A bear expends energy based on reward potential. Your job is to make the math not worth it. The transformation was remarkable. Jake, who had arrived with a film crew mentality, now moved through the wilderness with genuine respect and growing competence. One evening, he approached Marcus at the campfire. I had 300,000 people watch me build that platform, he said quietly. I thought I was teaching them survival, but I was just teaching them how to look good failing. You were teaching them what you knew at the time, Marcus replied. Now you know different. That is how learning works. On the 10th day, the challenge officials announced that a large male black bear had been spotted moving through the area again. Most participants immediately checked their caches with nervous energy. Marcus walked his territory with calm confidence, Jake following close behind. They checked each of Marcus's 5 small cache points. Every single one remained secure and untouched. How many challenges have you done? Jake asked. This is my first official one, Marcus admitted. But I have spent 30 years in these mountains. The wilderness does not care about your resume. It only cares about whether you understand it. That night, the remaining participants gathered around a communal fire. Of the original 32 challengers, only 18 remained. Sarah had withdrawn. 6 others had quit after losing their food supplies. 3 more left due to injury or illness unrelated to the bear incidents. Patricia addressed the group with rare approval in her voice. You 18 represent something important. You adapted. You learned. You set aside ego for survival. That is the real challenge. Marcus sat at the edge of the firelight, watching the faces around him. These people had arrived as competitors. They were leaving as students of the wilderness. Jake caught his eye across the flames and nodded with genuine gratitude and respect. The final 4 days of the challenge passed with a sense of earned tranquility. The participants who remained had found their rhythm with the wilderness, moving through the forest with newfound confidence and respect. Marcus watched his students flourish. Jake documented the experience now with humility, his camera capturing genuine moments of struggle and growth rather than manufactured drama. His videos showed raw honesty. Failed attempts at starting fires, successful fish catches after hours of patience, and quiet moments of reflection by the river. The Davidson brothers had become inseparable partners, their earlier competition replaced by seamless cooperation. Tyler would scout for food sources while Connor processed and stored them using Marcus's distributed cache method. They had not lost a single meal to wildlife since adopting the approach. Elena worked alongside Marcus as an equal, and together they helped other participants refine their techniques. The camp had transformed from a collection of isolated competitors into a genuine community of learners. On the 13th night, Patricia gathered everyone for a final assessment. She walked among the participants, checking their remaining supplies, evaluating their campsites, and asking questions about their experiences. When she reached Marcus, she paused longer than with the others. "Your cache system," she said loud enough for others to hear. "In my 15 years running this challenge, I have never seen such a perfect success rate. 5 cache points, 0 losses, and you managed to teach half the camp your methods in the process." "I just did what the mountains taught me," Marcus replied simply. Patricia turned to address the full group. "Most of you came here thinking you knew survival. You brought elaborate plans, expensive gear, and confidence built on theory rather than experience. Then reality hit and you had a choice: quit or learn. Those of you standing here chose to learn." She gestured toward Marcus. This man was mocked on day 1. His methods were called inadequate, embarrassing, outdated. But he understood something fundamental that all your engineering and social media strategies missed. The wilderness rewards humility, not spectacle. Jake stood up, his voice steady and sincere. "I owe Marcus an apology. Public one. I disrespected him, his methods, and his experience because I thought followers equaled knowledge. I was wrong. He saved not just my challenge, but probably my life. Everything I thought I knew about survival was performance. He taught me what it actually means." Others nodded in agreement. Connor Davidson spoke next. "We built caches to impress people back home. Marcus built his to work. That is the difference between looking like a survivalist and being one." As the fire crackled between them, Marcus felt something he had not experienced since losing his guiding job: purpose. These people had not just learned techniques. They had learned respect for the wilderness and for the quiet wisdom that comes from decades of genuine experience. The morning of day 14 arrived with golden sunlight filtering through the pines. The challenge was complete. Helicopters would arrive by noon to extract the participants. 6 months later, Marcus stood in his small cabin outside Glacier Ridge, scrolling through his phone with bemused wonder. Technology had never been his strength, but the messages kept coming. Jake's YouTube channel had exploded after he posted his honest documentary about the challenge. The video, titled, "I Thought I Knew Survival Until an Old-Timer Humbled Me," had garnered over 5 million views. In it, Jake detailed every mistake, every moment of panic, and every lesson Marcus had taught him. The comment section overflowed with viewers thanking Marcus for teaching real survival skills. But Jake had done something more significant. He had used his platform to launch a series called Learning from the Masters, where he traveled to interview experienced wilderness guides, indigenous trackers, and veteran rangers. His subscriber count had doubled, but more importantly, the quality of his content had transformed completely. The Davidson brothers had opened a survival school in Colorado, naming it Small Cache Survival, in honor of the lesson that changed their perspective. Their courses emphasized humility, observation, and respect for nature over gear and spectacle. They had invited Marcus to be a guest instructor 3 times already, with a 4th visit scheduled for next month. Elena had written an article for a major outdoor magazine detailing the challenge and the bear incidents. Her piece, Why Bigger is Not Better in Wilderness Survival, had become required reading in several park ranger training programs. She called Marcus every few weeks, sharing stories and occasionally asking for advice on training scenarios. Most surprisingly, Patricia had offered Marcus a position as a consultant for future wilderness challenges. His job was to review participant preparations and provide guidance on sustainable, wildlife-safe practices. The pay was modest, but it gave him purpose and recognition that his decades of experience still held value. His phone buzzed with a new message. It was from Jake, starting a new series next month. Lessons from Marcus Webb. Want to co-host? We'll film in Montana. No fancy production, just real teaching. Interested? Marcus smiled, his weathered fingers typing slowly. As long as we keep the caches small. The mountains outside his window stood eternal and indifferent, as they always had. But Marcus had learned something in those 2 weeks that surprised even him. Sometimes the greatest validation comes not from proving yourself, but from passing on what you know to those humble enough to listen. He thought about that first day, kneeling beside his modest canvas bag while others built monuments to their egos. The wilderness had spoken, as it always does, and those willing to hear its lessons had survived and thrived. Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If it resonated with you, hit that like button and leave a comment sharing your thoughts. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss our next story, and let us know in the comments what kind of story you would like to hear next. Your support means everything, and we will see you in the next video.